a billionaire disguised himself as a beggar to find a wife in a beauty contest. Hello, welcome. Enjoy the content. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any stories. Maxwell Thornton looked out over New York City from his office in Thornton Tower, an imposing skyscraper that stood out against the Manhattan skyline. At 45, Maxwell had built a technological empire that made him one of the richest men in the world. However, as his eyes roamed over the cityscape, an inexplicable emptiness consumed him inside. His assistant, James, entered the room with a pile of documents. "Mr. Thornton, here are the contracts for the sponsorship of this year's Miss America pageant. We need your signature." Maxwell turned slowly, his blue eyes reflecting a mixture of boredom and discontent. "Another year, another parade of empty smiles and rehearsed answers," he muttered, reluctantly picking up the pen. As he signed the papers, an idea began to form in his mind. It was daring, perhaps even crazy, but the more he thought about it, the more irresistible it became. "James," he said, suddenly excited, "cancel my appointments for the next 2 months." The assistant looked at him perplexed. "Sir, what about the board meeting? The launch of the new product?" "Tell them I had to leave for urgent personal reasons," replied Maxwell, already on the move, opening drawers and collecting a few personal items. Over the next few hours, Maxwell worked out his plan. He would disguise himself as a beggar and take part in the Miss America pageant in a way that no one would expect. Not as a judge, not as a sponsor, but as an invisible observer, someone the contestants and staff would barely notice. As he prepared, Maxwell reflected on his motivations. The superficiality of the corporate world and social relationships suffocated him. The fake smiles, the empty niceties, all of it exhausted him. He longed for something real, something that couldn't be bought or sold. "I want to see what people are really like when they think they have nothing to gain," he muttered to himself as he put his luxury watch away in a safe. Maxwell thought of Sarah, his ex-wife. She had left him 3 years ago, claiming that he was more married to his work than to her. At the time, he didn't understand. Now, looking back, he saw clearly how distant, cold he had become, protected by layers of privilege and power. With a deep sigh, Maxwell picked up the phone and called his longtime friend, Dr. Robert Chen, a renowned plastic surgeon. "Rob, I need a favor, something discreet and unusual." Hours later, Maxwell was in Dr. Chen's private practice, discussing the details of a temporary makeover. Facial prostheses, professional makeup, even a slight alteration to his posture, all to make himself unrecognizable. "Max, are you sure about this?" asked Dr. Chen, concern evident in his voice. "It's not just a physical change, you know. Psychologically, it may be more challenging than you realize." Maxwell nodded, determined. "That's exactly what I need, Rob. A challenge that makes me feel something real again." Over the next few weeks, Maxwell prepared meticulously. He studied the habits and mannerisms of homeless people, practiced a new way of talking and walking. He created a background story for his character, John, a former veteran who has fallen on hard times. The day before his departure came quickly. Maxwell was in his penthouse apartment, taking one last look at the city he knew so well, but which he was now preparing to see from a completely new perspective. He picked up a small backpack in which he had placed some old clothes and essentials. In his pocket, he kept a small USB stick containing all the documents he needed to prove his real identity, should anything go wrong. "This is it," he said to himself, feeling a mixture of fear and excitement that he hadn't experienced for years. There's no turning back now. As he headed for the door, Maxwell stopped for a moment, looking at a portrait on the wall. It was a photo of him with Sarah, taken years ago, when they were both still smiling genuinely. He touched the picture gently. Maybe, after all this, he'll finally understand what I've lost, he whispered. With one last look back, Maxwell Thornton, the billionaire, left his life of luxury behind. As the door closed, John, the beggar, was born, ready to embark on a journey that promised to change not only his perspective, but perhaps his very essence. As he rode down the service elevator, avoiding being seen, Maxwell, now John, felt the weight of his decision. He was about to plunge into an unknown world, full of challenges and revelations. The Miss America pageant would only be the setting for a much deeper transformation. The elevator doors opened into the New York night, and John took his first steps into the unknown, leaving behind the comfort and security of his old life. The adventure had begun. The sun had barely risen when John, formerly known as Maxwell Thornton, arrived at the back of the luxurious Belmont Hotel in Atlantic City, where the Miss America pageant was being held. Wearing shabby clothes and carrying a worn-out backpack, he easily blended in with the workers arriving for their morning shifts. With cautious steps, John approached the service entrance. His heart was pounding, a mixture of anxiety and excitement that he hadn't felt for years. A uniformed security guard eyed him suspiciously. "Hey, you! What do you think you're doing?" The guard, whose badge identified him as Mike, approached with firm steps. John lowered his head, embodying the submissive posture he had practiced. "Sorry, sir. I was just looking for something to eat. I hear there's sometimes food left over from events." Mike hesitated, his hardened face softening slightly. "Look, I can't let you in, but..." He looked away and lowered his voice. "Come back here at 2 p.m. That's when we dispose of the leftovers from lunch." John nodded gratefully and walked away, feeling strangely touched by the small kindness. He found a nearby bench and sat down, observing the growing movement around the hotel. Hours passed, and the hotel lobby began to buzz with the arrival of the candidates. John approached discreetly, mingling with the curious onlookers who crowded around to see the beauties. "Look, it's Miss Texas," someone shouted, and a stunning young woman with blonde hair and a radiant smile walked past, waving to the crowd. John watched intently, noticing how Miss Texas's smile faltered for a moment when her eyes met his. She quickly looked away, her smile returning to normal as she greeted other fans. As the contestants continued to arrive, John noticed interesting patterns. Some, like Miss California, seemed completely absorbed in their own image, barely noticing the people around them. Others, like Miss Minnesota, a shy-looking redhead, seemed uncomfortable with all the attention. It was then that he saw her, Miss New York, a green-eyed brunette who emanated a serene confidence. Unlike the others, she paused for a moment, looking directly at John. To his surprise, she smiled, not the rehearsed smile he had seen so many times, but something more genuine. "Hi," she said softly, coming closer. "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" John, momentarily speechless, stammered, No, I'm fine. Thank you for asking." Miss New York nodded, her gaze filled with a compassion John had not expected to see. "If you need anything, let me know, okay?" And with that, she moved on, leaving John intrigued and touched by this brief moment of humanity. As the day progressed, John found ways to infiltrate different areas of the hotel. He observed rehearsals, overheard backstage conversations, and witnessed moments of vulnerability that cameras would never capture. In a less busy corridor, he overheard a heated conversation between two contestants. "Did you see that beggar out there?" said a voice which John recognized as belonging to Miss Texas. "I can't believe they let him hang around. It doesn't fit with the image of the pageant." "Sarah, please," replied another voice, which John identified as Miss Minnesota. "He's a human being, you know. Don't talk like he's garbage." "Oh, spare me the politically correct speech, Emily," Sarah retorted. "We're here to win, not to do charity." John walked away silently, his heart heavy. The conversation reminded him of business meetings where people were treated as mere numbers on a spreadsheet. But Miss Minnesota's defense surprised him positively. As the day drew to a close, John found a quiet moment in the hotel's inner garden. Sitting on a bench, he reflected on everything he had witnessed. "Hey, you again," a soft voice brought him out of his thoughts. It was Miss New York, holding 2 cups of coffee. "I thought you might like this," she said, offering one of the cups. John accepted it, genuinely touched by the gesture. "Thank you. That's very kind of you." Olivia," she introduced herself, taking a seat next to him. "What's your name?" "John," he replied, surprised at how easily the fake name came out of his lips. "So, John, what brings you to Miss America?" Olivia asked, her voice free of judgment. For a moment, John considered telling the truth, but something stopped him. Instead, he shared a modified version of his story. "I'm trying to understand people," he said, "to see beyond appearances." Olivia nodded thoughtfully. "You know, a lot of people think we're just here for the crown and the fame. But for me, it's a chance to make a difference, to use this platform for something bigger." John watched her carefully, noticing the sincerity in her eyes. "And how do you plan to do that?" "I want to focus on education programs for underprivileged communities," she replied, her face lighting up with passion. "I believe that education is the key to breaking the cycle of poverty." They continued talking for a few minutes, and John found himself deeply impressed by Olivia's intelligence and compassion. When she finally said goodbye, he sat there, reflecting on the encounter. That evening, lying on a bench in the square near the hotel, John thought about all the interactions he had had throughout the day. The unexpected kindness of security guard Mike, the surprising compassion of Olivia, the passionate defense of Miss Minnesota, and even the disdain of Miss Texas, it all formed a complex mosaic of humanity. He realized that his experiment was revealing much more than he had expected. It wasn't just about how people treated someone less fortunate, but about how they behaved when they thought they weren't being judged or evaluated. As the stars shone over Atlantic City, John closed his eyes, looking forward to what the next few days would reveal. He was just beginning to scratch the surface, and he already felt that this experience would change him forever. The third day of the Miss America pageant dawned with a different energy in the air. The contestants, already familiar with the unusual presence of John, the beggar, around the Belmont Hotel, reacted in different ways to his constant presence. Sarah, Miss Texas, was walking through the lobby with her impeccable posture when she spotted John sitting in a corner. His face contorted into a barely concealed expression of disgust. "Security," she called out, gesturing to one of the guards. "This fellow shouldn't be here. He's disturbing the guests." The security guard, recognizing John from the day before, hesitated. "Mom, he's not causing any trouble. We have orders to allow his presence." Sarah snorted, visibly annoyed. "That's ridiculous. We're in a class competition, not a homeless shelter." John watched the scene, feeling a mixture of fascination and discomfort. It was strange to see someone react with such disdain to his presence, something he had never experienced as Maxwell Thornton. As Sarah walked away, muttering about standards and expectations, Emily, Miss Minnesota, shyly approached John. "Hi," she said, her voice soft. I wanted to apologize for the behavior of some of the other girls. We don't all feel that way." John smiled gently. "No need to apologize. Everyone reacts according to their own experience." Emily nodded, taking a seat next to him. "You know, I grew up in a small town. My family didn't always have much. Seeing someone treated like that reminds me of how people sometimes looked at us." The conversation flowed naturally, and John found himself genuinely touched by Emily's story. She talked about her dreams of becoming a teacher, how the competition was an opportunity to get a scholarship. "Sometimes I feel out of place here," she confessed, "like I don't really fit in." "Maybe not fitting in is a good thing," John replied, surprising himself with the depth of his own words. As they talked, Olivia, Miss New York, joined them, bringing coffee for the three of them. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said with a warm smile. "Not at all," John replied, noticing how Olivia seemed perfectly at ease in the situation. The three contrasting figures, the apparent beggar, the shy Midwestern girl, and the sophisticated New Yorker, formed an unusual picture in the elegant hotel lobby. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Madison, Miss California, a stunning blonde who looked like she'd stepped straight out of a TV commercial. "What's going on here?" she asked, her tone oscillating between curiosity and disdain. "We're just talking, Madison," Olivia replied calmly. "Do you want to join us?" Madison hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. I don't know if I should. It's not appropriate." "Appropriate for what?" Emily asked, a note of defiance in her usually shy voice. "For the pageant, of course," Madison replied, as if it were obvious. "We're here to represent the best of America, not to, well, you know." John watched the dynamic unfold, fascinated by how each of the girls reacted to the situation. Madison, clearly torn between her curiosity and her sense of decorum. Emily, finding the courage to stand up for her beliefs. And Olivia, navigating the situation with a grace that seemed natural. "Madison," Olivia said softly, "perhaps the best thing about America is precisely our ability to connect with each other, regardless of the circumstances." Olivia's words seemed to touch something in Madison. She looked at John, really seeing him for the first time. "I suppose you're right," she said, hesitantly sitting down with the group. In the minutes that followed, John witnessed a subtle but profound transformation. Madison, initially stiff and uncomfortable, began to relax. She shared stories about the pressure she felt to be perfect, about how she sometimes wished she could just be herself. "Sometimes I feel like I'm always wearing a mask," Madison confessed, surprising everyone with her sudden honesty. "Like the world just wants to see a polished version of me." John nodded understandingly. "Sometimes it's when you strip away all expectations that you really find yourself." The words hung in the air, loaded with meaning. Each of the girls seemed to be reflecting deeply on what had been said. As the morning progressed, more candidates joined the unusual group. Some, like Sarah, kept their distance, casting disapproving glances. But many others, curious and intrigued, approached. John watched with admiration as Olivia and Emily naturally took on the role of mediators, facilitating conversations and making everyone feel included. Topics that went far beyond the superficiality of the contest began to emerge: dreams, fears, hopes for the future. One of the contestants, Jessica, Miss Ohio, shared her struggle with anxiety and how the pageant sometimes exacerbated those feelings. Others opened up about insecurities and family pressures. "You know," said Amber, Miss Georgia, "I never thought I would feel so real in a beauty pageant. It's like, for a moment, all those expectations disappeared." John smiled, feeling a wave of emotion he hadn't expected. He had started this journey looking for authenticity, and here it was, blossoming before his eyes. As the day progressed and the candidates reluctantly dispersed to their appointments, John reflected on what he had witnessed. The initial reactions of mistrust and prejudice had given way to moments of genuine human connection. He realized that by stripping away his identity as a billionaire, he had not only challenged the candidates' perceptions, but had also created a space where they could truly be themselves. As he watched the young women walk away, each carrying with them the seeds of a new perspective, John felt a mixture of hope and melancholy. He wondered if, like Maxwell Thornton, he had ever really seen the people around him so clearly. The afternoon sun bathed Atlantic City in a golden glow, and John knew that, whatever the final outcome of the contest, something deep and meaningful had already been achieved. The masks had fallen, even if only momentarily, revealing the beauty of authenticity that existed beyond appearances. The fourth day of the Miss America pageant brought with it an atmosphere full of anticipation. The candidates, now more familiar with the presence of John the Beggar, began to open up in surprising ways, revealing deeper layers of their personalities and life stories. The morning began with a rehearsal for the talent competition. John, sitting discreetly in a corner of the auditorium, watched the young women prepare for their performances. It was then that he noticed Olivia, Miss New York, sitting alone, her face a mask of concentration and something else. Concern? Driven by genuine curiosity, John approached her. "Is everything all right, Olivia?" he asked softly. Olivia raised her eyes in surprise. For a moment, John saw her mask of confidence falter. I don't know," she admitted, her voice almost a whisper. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing the right thing." "What do you mean?" John asked, taking a seat next to her. Olivia hesitated, then, as if a dam had broken, the words began to flow. "You know, I came to this contest with big dreams. I wanted to use this platform to make a difference, to talk about education and opportunities for underprivileged communities. But sometimes I feel like I'm just perpetuating a system that values appearance more than substance." John listened attentively, feeling a twinge of guilt. Like Maxwell Thornton, he had sponsored countless contests like this without ever really considering their deeper impact. "But you're making a difference," John said gently. "I've seen how you've been a positive force here, how you've encouraged the others to be authentic." Olivia smiled sadly. "Thank you, John. It's just, sometimes I wonder if there's a better way to achieve my goals." While they were talking, Emily, Miss Minnesota, shyly approached. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, "but I wanted to thank you both. Our conversations, well, they gave me the courage to do something different today." John and Olivia exchanged puzzled glances. "What are you going to do?" Olivia asked. Emily took a deep breath. "Instead of singing as planned, I'm going to recite a poem I wrote. It's about growing up in a small Midwestern town, about dreams and realities. It's not glamorous, but it's true." John's heart filled with pride as he saw Emily's transformation. "That's wonderful," he said sincerely. As the day progressed, John witnessed more moments of authenticity and courage. Madison, Miss California, surprised everyone by abandoning her elaborate dance routine in favor of an honest monologue about the challenges of growing up under the spotlight of the entertainment industry. Even Sarah, Miss Texas, who had initially been so dismissive, showed a different side. During an intermission, John saw her consoling Jessica, Miss Ohio, who was having an anxiety attack backstage. "Take a deep breath," Sarah said softly, her hand on Jessica's back. "You are more than this moment. Remember why you're here." John watched the scene, amazed at the compassion Sarah showed away from the public eye. As the evening approached, John found himself reflecting on the day's revelations. Each of the candidates had shown a depth and complexity that went far beyond their polished appearances. It was then that Olivia found him again, her eyes shining with a new determination. "John," she said, "I've made a decision. Regardless of the outcome of this contest, I'm going to use my platform to talk about the things that really matter. About education. about equal opportunities, about seeing beyond appearances. John smiled, feeling a mixture of pride and admiration. That's incredible, Olivia. You're going to make a difference. As the lights in the auditorium dimmed, signaling the end of another day of rehearsals, John found himself thinking about his own journey. Like Maxwell Thornton, he had sought authenticity, but it was here, disguised as a beggar, that he was witnessing the true beauty of humanity. The candidates said goodbye, each carrying with them the lessons and revelations of the day. John remained seated in the empty auditorium, his heart full of conflicting emotions. He knew that this experience was changing him in ways he had never imagined. As night fell over Atlantic City, John wondered what else this journey would reveal, not only about the young women in the pageant, but also about himself. The masks were falling, and with them, the barriers that had separated people from different worlds for so long. The fourth day of the Miss America pageant was over, but the revelations it brought with it promised to echo far beyond the confines of the stage and the spotlight. The fifth day of the Miss America pageant dawned with a different atmosphere. The candidates, deeply affected by the experiences of the last few days, seemed more reflective and introspective. John, still disguised as a beggar, felt that he was about to witness something truly transformative. The morning began with a photo shoot on Atlantic City's iconic boardwalk. John watched from afar, noticing how the interactions between the candidates had changed. There was less competitiveness and more genuine camaraderie. Olivia, Miss New York, approached John with a warm smile. "Good morning, John. I hope you don't mind, but I shared with some of the other girls about our conversations. They're curious to get to know you better." John felt a pang of anxiety. Was his disguise working too well? He nodded slowly. "Sure, I'd be happy to talk to them." Throughout the day, John found himself at the center of deep and revealing conversations. Emily, the shy Miss Minnesota, shared how her pageant experience was helping her overcome her insecurities. "You know, John," she said, her eyes shining with a new confidence, "I realized that I don't have to fit into a mold to be valuable. My authenticity is my greatest strength." Madison, Miss California, surprised everyone with her vulnerability. "I've always felt pressured to be perfect," she confessed, "but talking to you, especially you, John, I realized that perfection is an illusion. True beauty lies in being genuine." As the day progressed, John noticed a subtle but profound change in the interactions between the candidates. They were more open, more willing to show their true personalities. The masks of competition and perfection were beginning to fall away, revealing complex, multifaceted young women. During a break in rehearsals, Sarah, the Miss Texas who had initially been so dismissive, approached John with an expression of regret. I wanted to apologize," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "My initial behavior was unforgivable. I realized that I had judged you based only on appearances, something I always hated when people did that to me." John was touched by Sarah's sincerity. "There's no need to apologize," he replied gently. "We're all learning and growing." As the afternoon turned into evening, the candidates spontaneously gathered in a circle on the beach. John was invited to join them, and he found himself in the middle of a deep conversation about authenticity and genuine connections. Jessica, Miss Ohio, spoke about her struggle with anxiety. "I always felt like I needed to hide that part of me," she admitted. "But being here, talking openly, made me realize that I'm not alone, that being vulnerable isn't weakness, it's strength." Olivia, who had become a sort of informal leader among the contestants, spoke passionately about the importance of authentic relationships. "This pageant should be about celebrating our differences, our unique stories," she said. not about fitting into a predefined mold of beauty or grace. John watched, amazed at the transformation he was witnessing. These young women, who had initially seemed so focused on a narrow vision of success and beauty, were now embracing their authenticity and vulnerability. As the sun set over the Atlantic, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, John felt a wave of emotion wash over him. He had started this journey seeking to understand authenticity in relationships, but he was discovering much more than he had expected. "You know," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion, "when I came here I thought I was going to teach something, but the truth is that I've learned more from you than I could have imagined. You've shown me the true meaning of beauty and authenticity." The candidates looked at John with a new appreciation. There was a glint of recognition in their eyes, as if they were seeing beyond his disguise, not to the billionaire he was, but to the man he was becoming. Amber, Miss Georgia, spoke what they all seemed to be thinking. "John, you may not have a crown or a title, but you've shown us something more valuable than any prize. You've shown us the power of being true to yourself and to others." As the stars began to dot the night sky, the group remained on the beach, sharing stories, fears, and hopes. John felt he was witnessing something truly special, a moment of genuine connection that transcended social and economic barriers. That evening, as he walked back to his bench in the square, John reflected on the journey he had undertaken. He had sought authenticity in relationships and, in the process, had discovered a profound truth about himself and the nature of human connection. The fifth day of the Miss America pageant was over, but the lessons about authenticity and true relationships would continue to resonate far beyond that starry night in Atlantic City. The sixth day of the Miss America pageant dawned with an atmosphere of expectation and reflection. John, still in his beggar's guise, felt the weight of the revelations and experiences of the last few days. The consequences of his experiment were unfolding in ways he could never have predicted. The morning began with a rehearsal session for the final night. John watched from afar, noticing how the interactions between the candidates had changed dramatically. The air of fierce competition had been replaced by a sense of camaraderie and mutual support. Olivia, Miss New York, approached John with a thoughtful look on her face. "John," she began, her voice heavy with emotion, "I want you to know that our conversations, well, they changed something in me. I'm rethinking what I really want to do with my life after this contest." John felt a surge of pride and, at the same time, a twinge of guilt. "What do you mean, Olivia?" "I've decided that, regardless of the outcome here, I'm going to dedicate my time to working with homeless people," she explained, her eyes shining with determination. "I want to make a real difference, not just talk about it on a stage." As the day progressed, John witnessed more moments of transformation. Emily, the shy Miss Minnesota, surprised everyone by announcing that she was giving up her scholarship at a prestigious university to work on community projects in her hometown. "I realized that I can make more of a difference by coming home and directly helping my community," she explained, her voice shaking with emotion. "And I owe a lot of that realization to you, John." The impact of the experiment wasn't just limited to the candidates. John felt a profound change in himself. The layers of privilege and distance he had built up over the years as Maxwell Thornton were crumbling. For the first time in a long time, he felt truly connected to the people around him. During a break in rehearsals, Sarah, Miss Texas, approached John with tears in her eyes. I need to confess something," she said, her voice breaking. "My initial attitude towards you, well, it reflected a lot of who I really am, or was. I realized how much prejudice and arrogance I carried. That experience, you made me want to be a better person." John was deeply touched by Sarah's honesty. "The important thing is that you've recognized this and are willing to change," he replied gently. As the afternoon progressed, John noticed a change in the general atmosphere of the contest. The contestants seemed less concerned with their appearance and more focused on discussing social issues and ways to make a difference in their communities. Madison, Miss California, surprised everyone by announcing that she was planning to use her platform to advocate for reforms in the education system. "I realized there's a lot more at stake than just a crown," she said, her voice full of conviction. "I want to use my voice to make real change." As the sun began to set, John found himself reflecting on the profound consequences of his experiment. He had started this journey seeking authenticity, but what he found was a complete transformation, not just in the candidates, but in himself. That evening, the candidates organized a small, informal gathering on the beach. John was invited as the guest of honor. Sitting in a circle with these young women, he found himself moved by the depth of the conversations and the genuine connection he felt. "You know," he began, his voice quivering with emotion, "when I came here, I thought I was embarking on a social experiment, but what I discovered was much deeper. You taught me the true meaning of empathy, of human connection. You have changed me as much as I may have changed you." The candidates looked at John with a mixture of gratitude and admiration. There was a silent recognition that, together, they had experienced something extraordinary. Jessica, Miss Ohio, spoke what they all seemed to be thinking. "John, you have shown us that true beauty is not in looks or status, but in the ability to genuinely connect with others. That's something we'll carry with us forever." As the stars shone over the Atlantic, John felt a deep sense of peace and purpose. He knew that when he returned to his life as Maxwell Thornton, nothing would be the same. The lessons of empathy, authenticity, and human connection he had learned would shape his future decisions and interactions. The 6th day of the Miss America pageant had come to an end, but the consequences of John's experiment would continue to reverberate. Lives had been transformed, perspectives altered, and a new sense of purpose born. And at the heart of it all was the simple truth John had discovered, that true wealth lies in the genuine connections we make with each other. The final day of the Miss America pageant dawned with an atmosphere of expectation and reflection. John, still in his beggar's disguise, felt the weight of the revelations of the last few days. The candidates, transformed by the experience, gathered for a final chat before the big night. Olivia, Miss New York, took the initiative to open the discussion. "I think we've all realized that this pageant is about so much more than just outer beauty," she began, her gaze sweeping the group. "John has shown us that there is a much deeper beauty in each of us." Emily, Miss Minnesota, nodded emphatically. "It's true. I've always felt pressured to fit into a specific mold. But now, well, now I see that our diversity is what makes us truly beautiful." John watched, amazed at the transformation he saw before his eyes. These young women, who once seemed so focused on their outward appearance, now spoke passionately about authenticity and inner value. Madison, Miss California, who had previously seemed so preoccupied with her image, surprised everyone with her honesty. "You know, I always thought I had to be perfect to have value. But this experience has shown me that our imperfections, our struggles, are what make us human and connected to each other." Sarah, Miss Texas, who had initially been so dismissive of John, spoke with tears in her eyes. "I want to apologize again, John. My initial attitude reflected everything that is wrong with the beauty industry. We judge people based on appearances without bothering to get to know their stories." John felt a surge of emotion when he saw the genuine transformation in Sarah. "There's no need to apologize," he said softly. "We're all learning and growing." As the conversation deepened, the contestants began to share their own criticisms of the beauty industry. Jessica, Miss Ohio, spoke about the pressure she felt to maintain a perfect appearance. It's exhausting, always having to look flawless, always having to smile, even when you're feeling insecure or anxious. Amber, Miss Georgia, agreed. And the worst thing is that this pressure doesn't just come from the pageant. It's everywhere. In magazines, on TV, on social media. It's like we're constantly being judged on how we look. Olivia, always the voice of reason, added, "The problem is that this obsession with external beauty distracts us from what really matters. How many times have we failed to appreciate someone's intelligence, compassion, or creativity because we were too busy judging their appearance?" John, listening attentively, felt it was time to share his own thoughts. When I decided to do this experiment, I wanted to understand how people related when they weren't under the pressure of status and wealth. What I discovered was much deeper. I saw that true beauty lies in authenticity, in vulnerability, in the ability to genuinely connect with others. John's words resonated deeply with the candidates. Emily, with tears in her eyes, said, "I think we've all learned that real beauty comes from within. It's not something we can buy or apply on the surface." Madison added, "Maybe it's time to rethink what these beauty pageants really mean. Instead of just focusing on looks, we could celebrate diversity, intelligence, character." Olivia, ever practical, suggested, "What if we used our platform to challenge these unrealistic standards of beauty? To show that there is beauty in all shapes, sizes, and colors." The ideas began to flow. The candidates talked about using their platforms to promote a more inclusive and realistic vision of beauty. They discussed ways to incorporate meaningful social causes into the pageant, to celebrate diversity, and to promote self-acceptance. John watched, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. He had started this journey thinking he would teach something, but in fact, he had learned as much as he had taught. As the sun set over Atlantic City, marking the end of this extraordinary journey, John knew that the lessons learned here would go far beyond the pageant. These young women, transformed by their experience, would take with them a new vision of beauty and self-worth. And what about John? Well, he knew that when he returned to his life as Maxwell Thornton, nothing would be the same. He had seen beyond the surface, beyond appearances, and discovered the true beauty of human connection. And that, he knew, was the most valuable lesson of all. The final day of the Miss America pageant arrived, bringing with it an atmosphere of expectation and excitement. John, still in his beggar's disguise, felt the weight of the decision he had to make: reveal his true identity as Maxwell Thornton, or maintain the disguise that had taught him so many valuable lessons. The candidates gathered one last time before the grand final. The air was charged with emotion and camaraderie, a marked contrast to the competitive atmosphere at the start of the pageant. Olivia, Miss New York, who had become a central figure in this journey of self-discovery, approached John with a warm smile. "John, no matter what the outcome tonight, I want you to know that you have changed our lives in ways we could never have imagined." John felt his heart squeeze. The connection he had developed with Olivia and the other contestants was deeper and more genuine than anything he had ever experienced in his life as a billionaire. As the candidates prepared to take the stage, John made his decision. He couldn't go on with the deception, not after everything they had shared. With his heart racing, John asked for a moment's attention. "Before you go on stage, there's something I need to confess," he began, his voice trembling slightly. The candidates turned to him, curious and a little apprehensive. "My name is not John," he continued. "Actually, I'm Maxwell Thornton, the sponsor of this contest." A stunned silence fell over the group. The candidates' eyes widened in shock and disbelief. "I disguised myself as a beggar because I wanted to understand how people really relate when they're not under the pressure of status and wealth," Maxwell explained. What I discovered was much deeper and more meaningful than I could ever have imagined. Reactions varied. Some candidates seemed hurt, others confused. Olivia, however, stepped forward, her eyes shining with understanding. "You taught us to see beyond appearances," she said softly. "And now, you're giving us the chance to do the same with you." Her words seemed to break the tension. One by one, the contestants began to share how the experience had changed them. Emily, the shy Miss Minnesota, spoke with a new confidence. "It doesn't matter who you really are, John, or Mr. Thornton. What matters is the connection we create, the lessons we learn." Sarah, Miss Texas, who had initially been so dismissive, now had tears in her eyes. "You've taught me more about humility and compassion than anyone else. Thank you for that." Maxwell looked at each of them, feeling a mixture of emotions: gratitude, humility, and a deep sense of connection that he had never experienced before. "You've shown me that true wealth isn't in bank accounts or social status," he said, his voice laced with emotion. "It's in the connections we make, the authenticity we share." Olivia moved closer to Maxwell, taking his hands in hers. "What about love?" she asked softly. "Did you find the answer you were looking for?" Maxwell looked into Olivia's eyes, seeing in them a depth and understanding that went beyond any physical beauty. "I think so," he replied. "True love can't be bought or sold. It comes from honesty, vulnerability, the ability to see and accept someone for who they really are." At that moment, surrounded by women he had come to know and admire, not for their outer beauty, but for their inner strength, Maxwell Thornton felt he had found something far more valuable than any material wealth could provide. The Miss America pageant would go on, but for Maxwell and the contestants, the real prize had already been won. They had learned to see beyond appearances, to value authenticity over status, and to recognize that true love knows no barriers of class or circumstance. As the stage lights came on and the music began to play, Maxwell knew that this experience had changed not only the candidates' lives, but his own. He had embarked on this journey seeking to understand love and human connection, and in the process had discovered a fundamental truth, that true beauty and true love come from within. And so, with open hearts and transformed minds, they entered a new chapter of their lives together, ready to face the world with a new perspective on what really matters. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.